We're very lucky to have with us live in the studios this morning Aaron Dixon. Aaron Dixon was co-founder of the Black Student Union at the University of Washington, helped organize the Seattle chapter of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, also known as SNCC, and was one of the co-founders of the Seattle chapter of the Black Panther Party. He has since founded Central House, a nonprofit that provides transitional housing for youth, and was one of the co-founders of the Cannon House, a senior assisted living facility. And he also ran for the U.S. Senate on the Green Party ticket in 2006. And he is here to talk about his new book, My People Are Rising, Memoir of a Black Panther Party Captain. Aaron, thank you very much for coming in and spending time with us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
So start out, tell us, what was the motivation in writing your book, My People Are Rising, Memoir of a Black Panther Party Captain?
Well, it was really initiated by the death of Huey P. Newton. When I learned of Huey's death, it really dawned on me that, that I should write a story about the Black Panther Party, because a lot of people really did not know or understand the full extent of what the Black Panther Party was about, and the dedication that Black Panther Party members went through, and what we sacrificed, and all the things that we had accomplished. And I felt it was really, it was emotionally important to me to tell the story, because there were so many emotions involved. There were so many wonderful people that I knew in the Black Panther Party. There were so many people that died and gave their lives as members of the Black Panther Party, as well as many people who ended up in prison and languished and are still languishing in prison today, as well as many, many people who were in exile in the Black Panther Party. And I just felt that people had to know that story.
So tell us about the creation of the Black Panther Party, the conditions that brought that about.
Well, in the mid '60s, there were many, many, many factors that led to the Black Panther Party being created. We lived in a decade of political assassinations. First there was a political assassination of John F. Kennedy, who really was the first president, him and his brother, to really represent and really say that they were going to support the civil rights movement, and they were really going to try to support justice. And that really meant a lot to a lot of black people. And then when he was assassinated, us as young people seeing the president of our nation being assassinated. A few years later, Medgar Evers was assassinated, who was one of the giants in the civil rights movement. He was right up there with Martin Luther King. He was an extremely important figure. And to watch him assassinated, and the whole civil rights movement that played out before our very eyes on television, and the demonstrators and Bull Connor saying that we're going to get these niggers, and watching watching all these young people being beat and sent to jail, and the bombing of the church in Birmingham, Alabama, and those little black girls that were killed and mutilated in that bombing, and the civil rights workers that were murdered. We were watching this every day, and this was politicizing us. And also the fact that our generation was very much connected to history. I lived in a house with my great-great-grandmother at one time, and she was born in 1867, and we were part of the oral tradition. We were taught by our parents and our relatives and our grandparents and our great-grandparents and our aunts and uncles. We listened to their stories of slavery, their stories of overcoming a lot of racism and overcoming many, many obstacles. So and then when Malcolm X was assassinated, that was the birth of the Black Panther Party. That's when Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale and others really joined together and formed the Black Panther Party. And then when Martin Luther King was assassinated, then that's when thousands and thousands of young people all across the country began to understand that the Black Panther Party was the vehicle that we needed to address, what was going on in this country. And I don't mean just black youth. I mean Latino youth, Asian youth, white youth, all across the board, Native American youth, had really decided that when Martin Luther King was murdered, that okay, then we're going to have to address this, and we're going to have to address it with sterner stuff. We're going to have to address it with more than demonstrations. That we're going to have to think about defending ourselves.
And wasn't it about the time that Martin Luther King was assassinated that you went down to Los Angeles?
It was Oakland,
Oakland.
California.
Okay,
Yeah, and actually, I was sitting in the county jail along with Larry Gossett and Carl Miller, two leaders of the Black Student Union at the University of Washington. My brother, also Aaron Dixon and Anthony Ware, were arrested right out of Garfield High School because we had participated in a demonstration at Franklin High School. We had taken over Franklin High School and addressing some racism and some issues there. And so we found ourselves sitting in this archaic King County jail, and then the news comes on that Martin Luther King was assassinated, and that was really very hard. That was very hard because we were in jail, we were confined, and we had no way of expressing our anger, as was taking place all across the country at that time. Riots began to break out all across the country when Martin Luther King was assassinated. And so, I just remember late that night, sitting in the bunk of the jail and just saying to myself that, I was not going to demonstrate anymore. I was not going to picket anymore. That I was going to pick up a gun, and we were going to do what we had to do. Because I marched with Martin Luther King when I was 12, 13 years old, and I got a chance to meet him. And, it was odd that I felt like I had to protect him as well. And sure enough, he was assassinated. So, and of course, the constant police brutality, the constant racism that we grew up with, that we had to deal with, seeing our parents struggle and dealing with racism constantly all the time. These were all the factors that led to the Black Panther Party being formed and to thousands of young people not just joining the Black Panther Party, but there were many, many other organizations. There was SDS, there was the Weatherman Underground, there was Native AIM, Native American Movement, there was the Red Guard, there was the Brown Berets, Latino organization, there was a Black Berets, a Latino organization. We all supported each other, and we all had the same plan and the same ideology and the same strategies of what we wanted to do to work towards changing America and making America a better place for everyone.
I don't think a lot of people are aware of, and I wasn't aware of until just recently, that in Seattle I'm not sure when it switched over, but it was definitely in the 50s and probably into the 60s, that minorities weren't allowed to buy houses outside of the Central District.
Yeah, very much so. We could not buy a home outside of the Central area. Nobody could. We were all confined. And when I say we, I mean blacks, Japanese, Filipinos, and Chinese, and Latinos. We all were relegated to the Central area, which in one way was really nice, was really beautiful, because we all grew up together. We all went to school together, and we all knew each other, and we had really a beautiful connection in our community. It was almost like a safe haven. But I remember growing up in Bajona, and growing up, all of us kids knew all of the businesses and the business owners, and we could go in and talk and everything. But there was this one real estate office right on the corner of Union and 34th called Lake Washington Realtors, and they didn't do business with any minorities. They didn't do business with Asians or blacks, and we could not go into that office. As kids, we were not allowed to go in there, and they were not very friendly to us. So, and that's what brought Martin Luther King to Seattle, was the whole issue of the redlining that was taking place, and the fact that black people could not move past Madison or anywhere else in the city. And many years later, we would learn that they had covenants in certain neighborhoods, like in Shoreline. They had covenants that black people were not allowed to live in those neighborhoods.
So you went to Oakland and you met Bobby Seale?
Yeah, and matter of fact, as soon as we got out of jail, right after Martin Luther King's assassination, there was about 20 of us that went down to San Francisco to the first Black Student Union Conference, and there was one of the things that we heard about was that there was this Panther named Bobby Hutton that had been killed by the police on the same day that Martin Luther King had been assassinated. And so we went over to his funeral. And little Bobby Hutton was the first member to actually join up with Bobby Seale and Huey Newton. He was barely 15. He was just 14 years old, actually. And he was a high school dropout who didn't really learn how to read or write in high school. He was very much like a lot of young people that you see today that had been tossed aside by the educational system. And so he joined the Black Panther Party. Not only was he the first to join, but he was also the first to die at 17 years old. He was killed by the Oakland Police Department, shot over 20 times when he came out of a house with Eldridge Cleaver, and he was unarmed as well. So that was very moving and very touching and very emotional for us to go to that funeral and hear the story about little Bobby Hutton. And then an hour later, Bobby Seale, along with Kathleen Cleaver, came over to the Black Student Union Conference and gave the keynote speech at the conference, and it was one of the most dynamic speeches that I had ever heard, and it really moved me and my brother and Anthony Ware, because we were in different parts of the auditorium when he was speaking, but when it ended, we all three of us were right in Bobby Seale's face, telling him that we wanted the Black Panther Party chapter in Seattle. And a week later, him and George Murray, the Minister of Education, came to Seattle and formulated the Black Panther Party in Seattle, which was the first chapter outside of the state of California.
Talk about that more, about creating the chapter here in Seattle and what you guys did.
Yeah, well, it was that when he came up, he was at our parents' house, my mother's house, for 3 days, and there were young people from all over the central area and some from the South End who came. There were over 25 people meeting with him, with these dignitaries from Oakland, and learning about what the Black Panther Party was about and what it meant to be in the Black Panther Party. And one of the first things he told us was that, to be a member of the Black Panther Party, you had to have 2 weapons and you had to have 2,000 rounds of ammunition. We were also told that we had to read, we were given a book list of 25 books that we had to read, and we had to read 2 hours a day, and we'd have political education class every week. That was requirements, and that women were considered as equal in the Black Panther Party. And so that was the beginning of the launching of the Seattle chapter. In the first 3 or 4 months, we had over 300 applications that we took in, and there were a lot of people that came and joined the Black Panther Party here in Seattle, and they varied. We even had 2 Japanese brothers joined the Black Panther Party, as well as a Filipino young man who joined the Black Panther Party. We had a lot of Vietnam vets. Most of the membership was young people, from 16 to 20 years old. We had people who were in their 40s who were older. We had some professional people who joined the Black Panther Party, and then we just started doing what we were supposed to be doing. And at that time, it was not illegal to carry a weapon in Seattle. So we exercised our right. We exercised our legal right to carry our weapons, to let the police know that we were going to defend ourselves and we were going to defend our community at any cost. And you know, when we first got our telephones in and set up our offices, we started getting calls from the community for all sorts of reasons. And a lot of those calls had to do with police harassment or police brutality. Many of those calls had to do with domestic violence, which we would dispatch 4 or 5 armed Panthers to the house, and the domestic violence would end there. Um, Here's a story that a woman called the office and said that the landlord had taken the door off the hinges of her house because she couldn't afford to pay her rent, and she had 7 kids in the house. So we dispatched Panthers to the landlord's house. They got the door, they carried it down the street, and put it back on its hinges. So, you know, we were very much positioning ourselves to be the protectors of the community, you know, that we were not going to let anybody come in and take advantage of the people. If they did, they had to be accountable to us.
And at some point, you started instituting different programs that are the model for some of the programs we have today. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. You know, the interesting part about the Black Panther Party, because we were a well-read organization, the leadership was very well-read, and our leader was a very philosophical person. You know, we understood that nothing stood outside of change, that we always had to be changing. And that was the beautiful part of the Black Panther Party, is that we were always changing and adapting because we knew we had to do that, you know, strategically. When, we had a uniform that was part of the Black Panther Party that we had to wear, but by 1969, 1970, we stopped wearing the uniform because it not only made us targets, but it began to separate us from the community. And so that's when we began to look at other strategies besides carrying our guns, was that the strategy, because at that time, the war in Vietnam was sucking a lot of the resources out of the community. And so, and there were a lot of layoffs at Boeing and other places. So there was a lot of hardship in the community, so we began to develop what we called our survival programs. And one of the very first survival program that we created was a free breakfast for school children program, because kids were actually going to school hungry. And we said, how could little Larry learn that 4 apples and 5 apples equal 9 apples if he hasn't even had an apple? So we went to community centers, and we went to churches that were next to elementary schools, and we asked to use their facilities. And our first breakfast program was at Atlantic Street Center. Ike Aikita, he was one of the first people that stepped forward and let us use Atlantic Street Center right down the street from Coleman School for our breakfast program. And, you know, we went to Gay's Bakery, we went to Safeway and many other places, and we got food donated. And we would get up at 6 in the morning, and we would go there and cook breakfast for kids on their way to school. And we expanded to 5 different locations, you know, very shortly. We know at all the major housing projects, Yesler Terrace, High Point, Rainier Vista, Holly Park, you know, we had breakfast programs. And the beautiful part about that was that very shortly after we started our breakfast programs, the welfare mothers would come down to the breakfast program and ask if they could help. And pretty soon they took the breakfast programs over. We just made sure the food was there. So we didn't realize that we were beginning a process of empowering these women. And, you know, they were, many of them would later on go on to become organizers and in their community, and empowered to go out and do better for themselves. But we started so many different programs. The next program that we started was the free medical clinic, because we realized there was no free medical care in our community. There were no, if you wanted to go see a doctor or you need medical care, you had to go to a major hospital. And so there was a guy named Dr. John Green, who was a neurosurgeon at the University of Washington. And he came to us, and he said that I'm going to be your doctor. And so first, initially, he treated Black Panther Party comrades for medical care. And then we initiated our medical clinic. He helped us get that set up. And, he helped us with medical supplies. And we got nurses that volunteered their time. And, in 1969, we opened up the first free medical clinic in the Northwest. And the Black Panther Party opened up medical clinics all across the country. We're happy to say our medical clinic is still open to this very day. But through the medical clinic, we created a baby wellness program where we gave out nutrients and vitamins to newborn babies. We initiated the sickle cell anemia program, which was one of the first times that the Black Panther Party, through its newspaper, did an expose about sickle cell anemia, which is a disease that mainly affects black people, and a lot of black people did not even know about sickle cell anemia. They didn't even know if their kids had sickle cell anemia. So we first educated people about sickle cell anemia, then we began doing testing, and we did our first mass testing at Walla Walla State Prison of sickle cell anemia. And we started many other programs. There was the free shoe program, the free clothing program. There was we gave out bags of groceries once a week out of our office. We started a free legal aid program, which basically we got attorneys to come volunteer their time twice a week and give legal advice and legal services to people who could not afford to hire an attorney. And that, those are the three programs that the government allocated funds for. That was the breakfast programs, that was the medical clinics, and the legal aid program. Well, we also had a program called the Free Busing to Prisons program, because, we say, okay, these prisons are, hundreds and hundreds of miles away. How can these poor women and these poor families be able to get to go visit their loved ones in prison? So we first got some vans, and we started taking people once a week to the prisons, and we would hit all the prisons. And somebody donated a 34-passenger bus to us. And so now we had a bus to take people to the prison. We provided breakfast, and we provided lunch, and we took them to the prisons to visit their loved ones. And we created programs to take inside the prisons as well. So the Black Panther Party was about serving the people. That was our motto: serve the people, body and soul. And that's what we did.
And I believe there was even not locally, but another chapter that created a free ambulance service.
Yeah. In Harlem, they created a free ambulance program, and in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, they created an ambulance program. Wherever there was a hole, where there was a gap, where the community had a need, and those needs weren't being met, then we created a program around that. Once in Yesler Terrace, they had a pest control problem, and they had called the housing authority on numerous occasions, and it just wasn't getting done. So we got some party members, we trained them in pest control and how to go about doing it, and we did pest control in Yesler Terrace.
Going over the long list of the different programs that the Black Panther Party instituted, it seems like so many of those could be used now more than ever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's no doubt about it. The whole issue of medical care and dental care in this country has become an epidemic. And people who really need medical care and really need dental care cannot get it. It's out of their means in terms of cost. And so I'm really happy to see that there have been in certain parts of the country, there's been a lot of doctors and a lot of nurses and dentists that have come together and set up these programs in these big mass programs in these tents, where they are providing people who can't afford dental care and medical care, and actually providing some of these cares. And the food bank has become one of the largest operations, nonprofits in the state of Washington, and it's a lifeline to literally thousands and thousands of people in this state and across the country. And it was the Black Panther Party that started the first food bank, that really began to give out bags of groceries. And we did this all across the country. And I mentioned to you before the program that in Oakland, we gave out 10,000 bags of groceries with the chicken in every bag and a sack of potatoes and a loaf of bread and canned food in every bag. But these programs you're right, they are very much needed today.
So we only have a few minutes left. So obviously the federal government and local governments saw the Black Panther Party as a threat. Can you talk about that briefly?
Yeah, there was a concerted effort by the federal government, particularly, to destroy the Black Panther Party, and we just learned that they had plans to wipe us out by 1969, and they initiated a program called COINTELPRO to really wipe out and destroy the Black Panther Party, and many members, over 30 members of the Black Panther Party were killed in a 4-year period, and over 800 went to prison, and there are still some of those that are still in prison. Fred Hampton was one of the most important leaders of the Black Panther Party, 19 years old, head of the Chicago chapter, played an important role in stopping the gang warfare in Chicago. He was the one that started the first Rainbow Coalition, and he was assassinated in 1969. Bunchy Carter and John Huggins in L.A., two of the leaders of the Southern California chapter, which was one of the most powerful chapters in the nation. And Bunchy Carter, who had a nickname as the mayor of the ghetto because he was head of the largest gang in Los Angeles called the Slossons. And he was assassinated. So, and then there were many other very important members of the Black Panther Party that were assassinated. And so, yeah, it was a concerted effort. I had some assassination attempts on myself, and almost was railroaded to prison by a setup by the Seattle Police Department. We recently were able to get our FBI files, and it was really telling to look at those files and see the types of programs that they had set up to infiltrate the Black Panther Party and how they infiltrated the Black Panther Party. Unfortunately, the Seattle Police Department has destroyed all their files on the Black Panther Party, so we will never know to the extent that they went to try to, kill us and harass us and imprison us.
And at one point, wasn't it Mitchell and the Nixon administration that declared the Black Panther Party the number one threat?
Number one threat to the security of America. But they didn't tell us when they said the number one threat that we're going to have these guys wiped out by 1969. We did not know that they were going to have such a concerted effort to have us killed and wiped out by that time. But it's to our credit that we survived 1969 and went on to do many, many other things. But it was very dangerous being in the Black Panther Party. After a while, those 300 members really dwindled down to about 20 members. And because the efforts by the authorities was so resolute in terms of trying to kill us and trying to destroy us that we were literally fighting for our lives, and as well as continuing to fight for the survival of our community.
Which continues on to today.
Yes, it does.
Well, with that, we are unfortunately out of time. I want to thank you very much for coming in and spending time with us this morning.
Thank you for having me.